You don't lose power when someone yells at you. You lose it when they stop taking you seriously. And most people don't even notice the moment it happens. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Respect rarely disappears in a dramatic explosion. It leaks out quietly, text by text, delay by delay, joke by joke that goes just a little too far. One day a man named Evan noticed something strange. Nothing bad had happened to him. No betrayal, no public humiliation, no enemies stabbing him in the back. Yet people stopped replying fast. Meetings started without him. Plans changed and nobody apologized. When he spoke, people listened, but didn't move. That's the most dangerous place to be. Not hated, not feared, but optional. Here's the brutal truth this motivational world doesn't like to say out loud. Respect is not created by being understood. It is created by boundaries people don't want to test. And right now, if you're honest with yourself, you already feel it. You feel when people treat your time like it's flexible. You feel when your words are suggestions instead of signals. You feel when your presence doesn't shift the room anymore. That gut feeling, that's not insecurity, that's awareness waking up. Most people respond to this moment the wrong way. They try to be nicer. They explain themselves more. They over-communicate. They chase clarity. And every explanation silently tells the world one thing. I need you to understand me. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago, not as cruelty, as reality. Power doesn't announce itself. It doesn't negotiate for validation. It doesn't beg to be respected. It moves as if respect is already assumed. This video is not about turning cold. It's about becoming unmistakable. The kind of man people pause before crossing. The kind of man whose silence weighs more than his words. But before I give you the 9 ruthless tricks, something has to shift inside you first. Because if you don't flip this switch, every tactic will fail. Here is the switch. Respect begins the moment you stop proving and start withholding. Let me show you how this works. A man named Daniel once tried to earn respect by being reliable, always available, always helpful, always reasonable. At first, people praised him. You're such a good guy. You're so understanding. Then the tone changed. Requests turned into expectations. Favors turned into obligations. His yes lost value because it was guaranteed. Daniel didn't realize the shift until someone cancelled on him last minute and laughed it off. Not nervously, comfortably. That's the sound of lost leverage. Here's the lesson most motivational channels avoid. People don't disrespect you because you're weak. They disrespect you because they've learned there are no consequences. And consequences don't require anger. They require distance. Distance is the first quiet weapon of respect. Not disappearing, not ghosting, not sulking, but controlled access. When people know they can reach you anytime, you become background noise. When access is limited, attention sharpens. Think about it. The men everyone respects are rarely the most available. They don't rush to reply. They don't over-explain. They don't chase closure. Their calm creates uncertainty, and uncertainty creates respect. This is why Machiavelli warned against being overly familiar. Familiarity without boundaries breeds contempt. And here's where things get dangerous. The moment you decide to change, people will notice. Not consciously, instinctively. Your pauses will feel strange to them. Your silence will feel heavier. Your absence will feel louder than your presence ever did. Some will test you. They'll joke. They'll poke. They'll cross lines just to see if you still let them. This is the moment most men fold. They laugh it off. They smooth it over. They tell themselves, it's not that serious. But power is decided in these small moments. In the next part, I'll show you the first ruthless trick. How to use silence without becoming cold. How to let people expose themselves without confrontation. And how to create an invisible line others instinctively avoid. This is where respect quietly begins. The most powerful reaction is often the one you never give. Silence isn't empty. It's a mirror. Most men think silence makes them invisible. In reality, it makes other people reveal themselves. Let me explain. There was a man named Marcus, sharp mind, calm presence, not loud, not dominant in the obvious way. But something strange happened whenever someone tried to test him. When a colleague made a disrespectful joke, Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't confront. He didn't correct. He just paused, held eye contact, and said nothing. The room shifted. The Joker started talking again, too much, explaining, backtracking, nervous laughter filling the space where Marcus refused to react. That's when everyone felt it. Marcus didn't need to respond, and that scared them more than anger ever could. Here's the first ruthless trick Machiavelli understood deeply. Never rush to react. Let others expose their position first. Most people hang themselves with their own words, if you give them enough rope. The world trains you to respond instantly, reply fast, clarify, defend, explain what you meant. But every fast reaction gives away leverage. When someone disrespects you, they're often testing one thing: will he break frame? If you rush to explain, you've already lost. Because respect is not about winning the argument, it's about controlling the pace. Silence does three brutal things at once. It denies emotional access. It forces the other person to fill the gap. It signals confidence without words. And humans are wired to respect confidence they cannot read. Now let's be clear. This is not passive behavior. This is strategic restraint. There's a difference. A passive man stays silent because he's afraid. A powerful man stays silent because he's deciding. People feel that difference instantly. Here's what usually happens when you start using silence correctly. At first, people get uncomfortable. They lean forward. They talk more. They try humor, then pressure. Some will even accuse you. Why are you being weird? Why are you so quiet? Is something wrong? That's not concern. That's loss of control. Because your silence has removed their ability to manage the interaction. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People respect what they can't easily predict. The moment you stop being emotionally transparent, you stop being manipulable. Machiavelli warned that the man who reveals his inner state too freely invites exploitation. Not because others are evil, but because power flows toward clarity and away from mystery. Now listen carefully, because this is where most men misuse silence. Silence is not withdrawal forever. It's timed release. Marcus didn't stay silent indefinitely. He chose when to speak. And when he did, his words landed heavier, because they were rare. Scarcity increases value. This applies to money, time, attention, and words. If you speak less, people listen harder. If you respond slower, people recalibrate. If you stop narrating your emotions, people start guessing. And people always respect what they have to figure out. Here's a practical moment you'll recognize. Someone sends you a disrespectful message. Short, dismissive, casual. Old, you would reply fast, explain your intent, smooth it over. New, you does something different. You wait, not out of spite, not to play games, but because your time is no longer automatically available. When you finally respond, it's calm, direct, minimal, no emotion, no justification. That single change resets the power balance, because now the message underneath is clear. I decide when and how I engage, and that decision creates respect. But silence alone isn't enough, because if silence is the wall, then boundaries are the gate. And in the next part, I'll show you the second ruthless trick: how to set boundaries without confrontation, how to say no without saying the word, and how to make people feel consequences without threats. This is where people stop testing you. Most men think respect comes from saying the right words. It doesn't. It comes from what you refuse to do. Here's the second ruthless trick, and this one changes everything. Never explain your boundaries. Enforce them. Explanation is negotiation. Enforcement is authority. And authority is what people respect. Let me tell you about Victor. Victor was known as reasonable. Everyone liked him. Everyone also crossed him. He would say things like, "I don't like when you do that because I'd appreciate it if you could understand that. I'm just trying to be fair." Sounds mature, right? Wrong. Every explanation taught people something dangerous. Victor could be talked out of his own limits. So they pushed, they negotiated, they guilted him, they delayed. And Victor kept adjusting. Until one day, something snapped, not loudly but internally. He realized a brutal truth. People don't cross unclear boundaries, they cross negotiable ones. The moment you explain your boundary, you invite debate. And debate is where respect dies. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. A ruler who constantly justifies his rules signals uncertainty. And uncertainty invites challenge. Here's how quiet power actually sets boundaries. Not with speeches, not with anger, not with threats, with action. Victor changed one thing. When someone was late to a meeting, he started without them. No comment, no sarcasm, no lecture. When someone joked disrespectfully, he removed access. Less attention, less engagement, shorter responses. When someone overstepped, he didn't explain why it was wrong. He changed how available he was afterward, and something strange happened. People adjusted, fast. Not because Victor became scary, but because patterns changed. Humans learn boundaries the same way animals do, through repetition and consequence, not through logic. This is why explaining yourself feels noble, but fails, because explanations appeal to reason. Respect responds to structure. Let me make this painfully clear. If someone crosses your line and nothing changes afterward, you don't have a boundary. You have a preference. And preferences are optional. Boundaries are not announced. They are felt. Here's a moment you've lived through. Someone asks for something unreasonable. Your time, your energy, your compromise. Old you says yes, or explains why you can't. New you says something different. You say, that won't work. And you stop talking. No apology, no justification, no emotional padding. Silence after a boundary is what makes it real. Most people panic in that silence. They rush to soften it. But I don't mean it in a bad way. I just don't want you to think, stop. Every extra word weakens the line. The strongest boundaries are boring, plain, uneventful. And that's why they work. Because drama invites negotiation. Calm shuts it down. Now here's the twist nobody tells you. When you start enforcing boundaries, some people will disappear. Not because you did something wrong, but because access was the only reason they stayed. This is the moment that separates men. Most men panic here, they chase. They reopen the gate, they explain themselves back into disrespect. But the man who holds his ground gains something rare, clarity. He sees who respected him and who only tolerated him. And here's the real power shift. When people realize your boundaries don't move, they stop testing. Not consciously, instinctively. They schedule better. They speak cleaner. They think twice. Because now they understand something important. With you, actions have weight. In the next part, I'll reveal the third ruthless trick. How to control what people think they know about you, why mystery multiplies respect, and how revealing less makes you harder to manipulate. This is where your presence starts to feel heavy. The moment people think they fully understand you, they stop respecting you. Certainty kills curiosity, and curiosity is where power hides. Here's the third ruthless trick. Control what people think they know about you, not by lying, by withholding. There was a man named Adrian, competent, quiet, highly capable. But unlike everyone else, Adrian never overshared. He didn't talk about his plans. He didn't broadcast his struggles. He didn't explain his next move. People found this unsettling. They couldn't place him. Was he ambitious? Was he dangerous? Was he already 10 steps ahead? Or just reserved? They didn't know. And because they didn't know, they treated him carefully. Here's what most men do without realizing it. They narrate their lives, their fears, their frustrations, their intentions. They think transparency builds trust. In reality, uncontrolled transparency builds predictability. And predictability makes you easy to manage. Machiavelli warned that a man who reveals his inner workings hands others the blueprint to control him. Not because people are villains, but because humans naturally exploit patterns. If they know what you want, they know how to leverage you. If they know what hurts you, they know how to move you. If they know your next step, they know how to block you. Adrian understood something subtle. Mystery is not manipulation. It is self-protection. When people asked him questions, he answered, but never fully. Not evasive, not rude, just incomplete. What are you working on? Several things. Where do you see yourself going? Forward. What do you think about this situation? I'm observing. That was it. No extra detail, no emotional confession, and something interesting happened. People filled the gaps themselves. Some assumed he was powerful, some assumed he was connected, some assumed he knew something they didn't. And here's the psychological trap. People respect what they project value onto. The less you reveal, the more others imagine. And imagination is far stronger than explanation. This is why men who talk the least in the room often control the room. Because while others are speaking, they are being studied. Let me give you a dangerous insight. The man who explains himself constantly invites judgment. The man who remains partially unreadable invites caution. Caution is respect's quiet cousin. Now listen carefully, because this part is where many fail. Mystery does not mean isolation. You still connect. You still speak. You still engage. But you never dump your internal world onto people who haven't earned access. Access is currency. And once you give it away for free, people stop valuing it. Here's a moment you'll recognize. You meet someone new. They ask personal questions quickly, not out of care, out of curiosity. Old, you answers everything. New, you answers selectively. You don't rush intimacy. You don't rush trust, because trust that is rushed is often used against you later, and this is where the respect shift happens. People start leaning in when they talk to you. They listen for subtext. They watch your reactions closely. Why? Because information about you is no longer cheap, and scarcity always increases value. But this creates a new problem. When you stop oversharing, some people feel shut out. They accuse you of being distant, cold, arrogant. That's the test. Because now you must decide, will you reopen yourself to be liked, or will you hold your frame and be respected? Most men choose comfort. Power chooses restraint. In the next part, I'll reveal the fourth ruthless trick: how to make your time feel expensive, why urgency destroys authority, and how slowing down makes people adjust to you. This is where respect becomes visible. The fastest way to lose authority is to rush. The slowest man in the room usually controls it. Here's the fourth ruthless trick. Make your time feel expensive. Not by bragging, not by pretending to be busy, but by refusing to move at other people's speed. Let me tell you about Leon. Leon wasn't the smartest man in the room. He wasn't the loudest. He wasn't the most charismatic. But something about him unsettled people. He never hurried. When others spoke fast, he slowed down. When messages came in urgently, he waited. When pressure rose, his pace dropped, and slowly, without trying, people began adapting to him. Here's what most men don't realize. Urgency signals subordination. When you rush to reply, rush to agree, rush to fix, you're silently saying, your timeline controls me. And humans instinctively rank that behavior lower. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He warned that those who appear too eager appear dependent, and dependency kills respect. Leon changed one habit. He stopped reacting immediately, not out of ego, out of discipline. Emails waited, messages sat unread, decisions took time, and something powerful happened. People started being clearer, more concise, more respectful. Why? Because when access is delayed, people self-edit. They stop wasting words. They stop testing limits. They stop assuming compliance. Here's the uncomfortable truth. People value your time only when you do. If you treat your time as disposable, others will too. Now listen carefully, because this part is subtle. This is not about being unavailable to everyone. It's about being unavailable by default. Availability becomes a reward, not a habit. Leon still showed up when it mattered, but not on demand. That difference changed everything. Let me give you a moment you've lived. Someone asks for something quick, just 5 minutes, just a small favor. Old, you says yes immediately. New, you pauses. You say, let me check my schedule. Even if you know the answer, that pause does something powerful. It reminds them, your time is not assumed, and when you do say yes, it feels earned. Here's the paradox. The man who moves slowly actually gets more done, because people stop interrupting him, stop abusing access, stop treating him like an open door, and when he speaks, people listen, because they've learned his words cost time. Now here's the tension point. When you slow down, some people get irritated. They say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're too busy now. That's not criticism. That's loss of control speaking, because your pace is no longer synchronized to theirs. And here's the line you must never cross back over. Do not apologize for your pace. Apologies signal guilt. Guilt signals weakness. Calm confidence signals authority. Leon never explained himself. He simply moved deliberately. And over time, something locked into place. Meetings waited for him. Conversations paused when he spoke. Decisions carried his weight. Not because he demanded respect, but because he deserved it through behavior. But there's a deeper layer most men miss. Slowing down externally requires control internally, because silence and patience expose insecurity. In the next part, I'll show you the fifth ruthless trick: how to master emotional self-control, why visible emotion leaks power, and how calm becomes your most intimidating weapon. This is where people stop seeing you as manageable. The moment people can read your emotions, they start controlling you. Here's the fifth ruthless trick. Emotional control is silent dominance, not suppression, not pretending you feel nothing, but deciding what never gets shown. Let me introduce you to Caleb. Caleb used to wear his emotions openly. Frustration showed on his face, excitement spilled into his voice, disappointment leaked through his tone. People always knew where they stood with him. They also knew exactly how to push him. A late reply irritated him. Criticism rattled him. Disrespect provoked him. And every reaction handed others a remote control. Machiavelli warned that visible emotion is vulnerability. Not because feeling is weakness, but because displaying it gives leverage. Here's the rule powerful men live by. Feel everything. Reveal almost nothing. When Caleb learned this, his entire presence changed. Not overnight, but decisively. The next time someone disrespected him, he felt the anger rise. But he didn't react. No tightening jaw, no sharp reply, no defensive posture. Just stillness. And that stillness unsettled people, because humans are trained to read emotional feedback. When they don't get it, they panic. They wonder, did that work? Did I cross a line? Is he already 10 steps ahead? Emotionless calm is not emptiness. It is pressure. Think about it. Anger can be dismissed. Sadness can be exploited. Excitement can be manipulated. But calm can't be moved. This is why the man who stays composed during chaos instantly rises in status. Others look to him, wait for him, follow his lead, because composure signals control. Here's where most men misunderstand this. They think emotional control means being robotic. Wrong. It means choosing when emotion is revealed. Caleb still laughed, still enjoyed, still connected. But negativity, provocation, disrespect, those emotions never reached the surface, and soon, something interesting happened. People stopped trying to provoke him. Why? Because provocation without reaction feels pointless. Humans seek feedback. When there is none, the behavior dies. This is the same reason fire burns out without oxygen. Reaction is oxygen. Take it away, and disrespect starves. Here's a moment you'll recognize. Someone tries to embarrass you publicly. A joke. A comment. A subtle dig. Old you reacts. New you pauses. You look at them calmly, say nothing. Then continue the conversation as if nothing happened. That moment is devastating, because now everyone saw the imbalance. One man tried to grab power. The other didn't acknowledge the attempt, and power flowed toward the calm one. Now here's the internal test. Holding emotional control feels uncomfortable at first, because it forces you to sit with feeling without release. That discomfort is growth. Most men explode or explain because they can't tolerate internal tension. The disciplined man absorbs it and turns it into presence. But emotional control creates another shift. When people can't read you emotionally, they become careful with you. Carefulness is respect in disguise. In the next part, I'll reveal the sixth ruthless trick: how to stop chasing approval without becoming arrogant, why approval-seeking kills authority, and how indifference, used correctly, reshapes every relationship. This is where people stop sensing need in you. The fastest way to lose respect is to want it. The moment approval becomes your fuel, power drains out of you. Here's the sixth ruthless trick. Stop chasing approval. Let it chase you. Most men don't realize how visible approval-seeking really is. It leaks through tone, through timing, through over-agreement, through the way they soften their own opinions to avoid friction, and people feel it instantly. Let me tell you about Noah. Noah was competent, capable, well-liked, but something was off. Whenever he spoke, he checked faces. Whenever he made a decision, he looked for validation. Whenever there was tension, he rushed to smooth it. People didn't disrespect him openly. They did something worse. They ignored him. His ideas were considered, but not followed. His presence was tolerated, not weighted. He was included, but never central. That's the quiet cost of approval seeking. Machiavelli warned that the man who needs to be liked will always be ruled by those who can withdraw approval. Approval becomes a leash. Here's the brutal psychological truth. People respect those who don't need them, not those who reject connection, but those who could walk away without collapsing. Noah changed when he noticed one thing. Every time he compromised his opinion to be agreeable, people leaned back. Every time he stood firm, without aggression, people leaned in, because certainty is magnetic. Here's where most men get confused. They think stopping approval seeking means becoming arrogant. It doesn't. Arrogance demands validation. Confidence assumes it's optional. The difference is everything. Noah stopped filling silence, stopped nodding automatically, stopped agreeing just to keep things smooth. When he disagreed, he said so calmly. When he didn't care, he didn't fake interest. When he wasn't invited, he didn't ask why, and something uncomfortable happened. Some people pulled away, not angrily, quietly. Because when approval is no longer guaranteed, weak connections dissolve. That's not loss. That's filtration. The men who stayed around Noah after this shift, they respected him, because now his presence wasn't begging to be accepted. It was chosen. Let me give you a moment you'll recognize. Someone tells a story you don't find impressive. Old, you smiles. New, you listens neutrally. Someone expresses an opinion you disagree with. Old, you softens your stance. New, you says, I see it differently. No attack, no apology. That alone changes how people rank you. Because people subconsciously ask one question in every interaction. Does this person need me to agree? If the answer is yes, they feel superior. If the answer is no, they feel cautious. Caution is respect forming. Now here's the hardest part. When you stop chasing approval, you must tolerate misunderstanding. Some people will misread your calm as distance, your independence as arrogance, your boundaries as coldness. Let them. Trying to correct their perception is approval seeking in disguise. The man who holds power lets others be wrong about him, because reputation controlled by others is still control. Noah learned something critical. He didn't need to be liked by everyone. He needed to be clear with himself. Clarity creates gravity, and gravity pulls respect without effort. But there's a deeper layer still. When you remove approval as motivation, you remove manipulation as a threat. Because flattery no longer works, guilt no longer works, pressure no longer works. You become difficult to move, and difficult men are respected. In the next part, I'll reveal the 7th ruthless trick. How to create an invisible line people don't cross, why enforcing consequences once is better than warning 10 times, and how to make respect automatic instead of negotiated. This is where your presence becomes non-negotiable. People don't cross lines they believe are real. They cross lines they believe are imaginary. Here's the 7th ruthless trick. Create one consequence and enforce it once. That's all it takes. Most men talk about boundaries. Powerful men demonstrate them. Let me tell you about Julian. Julian was calm, reasonable, patient, too patient. When people crossed him, he warned them, then warned them again, then explained why it bothered him. Nothing changed. Because warnings without consequences teach one lesson. You can keep doing this. Machiavelli understood something brutal but precise. Punishment delayed feels optional. Punishment enforced feels permanent. Julian changed one rule. He stopped warning. The next time someone disrespected his time, he removed access. No announcement, no speech, no drama. Meetings stopped being scheduled. Messages received slower replies. Opportunities quietly disappeared. And the shock wasn't anger. It was confusion. Because people expect confrontation. They expect arguments. They expect emotional reaction. They don't expect silence paired with loss. That's when respect locks in. Here's the psychological mechanism at work. Humans are pattern learners. When behavior A leads to outcome B, the behavior changes automatically. But when behavior A leads to nothing, it repeats. This is why endless warnings fail. They keep the game alive. Julian's single enforcement ended the game. One moment, one action, one consequence. After that, people self-regulated. Because now the line was no longer theoretical, it was felt. Let me be very clear. You don't need to punish everyone. You only need to punish once. After that, Reputation does the work for you. People talk, quietly. He doesn't play. He doesn't explain. He just removes himself. That reputation is worth more than any speech. Here's where most men sabotage this step. They enforce, but then soften. They come back. They re-explain. They reopen access too quickly, and the lesson disappears. Because inconsistency kills authority. Machiavelli warned that mercy without structure creates contempt. Mercy after enforcement creates loyalty. Mercy before enforcement creates disrespect. Timing is everything. Here's a real-world moment. Someone crosses a line you've already tolerated too long. You decide this is it. You doesn't announce change. He changes behavior. No emotional confrontation. No dramatic exit. Just a shift. And that shift is noticed immediately. People start watching you differently, speaking more carefully, testing less. Because they now understand. With you, patterns matter. And here's the internal test you must pass. Enforcing consequences feels lonely at first. Because you are breaking a dynamic that benefited others. Some people will resent you quietly. Some will disappear. Some will suddenly behave perfectly. That's how you know it worked. Because respect isn't loud applause, it's behavioral adjustment. But now comes the danger. Once people stop crossing your lines, they start watching you more closely. And that means every word carries more weight. In the next part, I'll reveal the 8th ruthless trick, how to speak less but say more, why brevity increases authority, and how controlled speech makes people remember you. This is where your words begin to echo. The man who speaks the most usually controls the least. The man who speaks precisely controls the room. Here's the 8th ruthless trick. Say less. Let silence carry the weight. Most men dilute their authority with words. They over-explain, they over-justify, they over-clarify. And every extra word weakens the signal. Let me tell you about Eliot. Eliot used to think communication meant clarity, so he explained everything. His reasoning, his intentions, his emotions. People nodded, agreed, then did whatever they wanted. Because explanations invite interpretation. Interpretation invites resistance. Machiavelli understood something sharp and unforgiving. Power speaks briefly. Weakness speaks at length. When Eliot changed, it wasn't dramatic. He shortened his sentences, cut out emotional filler, stopped defending his decisions. When asked why, he simply said, "That's the decision," and stopped talking. The effect was immediate. People leaned forward, waited, filled the silence with their own assumptions, and assumptions always favor the one who speaks less. Here's the psychological reason this works. Humans associate brevity with certainty. If someone can say less and remain calm, we assume they don't need to convince. And whoever doesn't need to convince is assumed to be in control. Think about the most respected men you've seen. They don't ramble. They don't narrate. They don't argue endlessly. They speak, then stop. And the silence after their words does more work than the words themselves. Here's a moment you'll recognize. You state a boundary. Someone pushes back. Old you explains again. New you repeats the boundary, once. Then you stop. That pause is not empty. It's pressure. Because now the other person must decide, will they respect the line or test the consequence? Either way, you win. Because you are no longer negotiating. Eliot noticed something else. When he spoke less, people remembered more. His words landed heavier, quoted later, referred back to. Why? Because scarcity increases impact. When everything is said, nothing stands out. When little is said, everything matters. Now here's the discipline part. Saying less requires restraint. Your ego will want to clarify. Your anxiety will want to explain. Your fear will want to soften. Resist it. Because the moment you overtalk, you hand power back. Let silence do the work. Let others reveal themselves. And here's the twist most men miss. Silence doesn't just command respect from others. It trains you. It forces you to be deliberate, intentional, centered. And a centered man is hard to move. But now we reach the final and most dangerous realization. Because once you master silence, boundaries, pace, mystery, emotional control, people start treating you differently everywhere. And that creates one final choice. In the last part, I'll reveal the 9th ruthless trick, the one that locks all the others into place, the mindset shift that makes respect permanent, and the final Machiavellian truth most men are not ready to hear. This is where you decide who you will become. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something that settles around you when you stop needing anything from the room. Here is the ninth and final ruthless trick, the one that makes all the others permanent. Build a life you don't need permission to live. Everything you've learned so far, silence, boundaries, mystery, pace, emotional control, they all collapse without this foundation. Because the deepest source of respect is independence, not financial bravado, not social dominance, not status symbols, but options. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. The man with options is feared. The man without options is managed. Let me tell you about Roman. Roman didn't talk about his leverage. He didn't announce his plans. He didn't hint at his exit strategies, but he always had them. He could walk away from conversations, from jobs, from dynamics that didn't serve him, and people felt it. Not because he threatened to leave, but because he could. That's the final shift. When people sense you have alternatives, they stop playing games, because manipulation only works when the other person is trapped. Most men live trapped lives. They stay in situations they resent. They tolerate disrespect because they need the connection. They swallow humiliation to keep access, and that need radiates. Need is loud, need is visible, need invites control. Roman did the opposite. He quietly built his life away from the spotlight, skills that paid him, relationships that didn't drain him, routines that grounded him. So when pressure came, he didn't panic, because his identity wasn't attached to approval. This is the final Machiavellian truth. The man who can walk away never has to prove anything, and people sense that immediately. That's when respect becomes automatic, not because you're intimidating, but because you're unmovable. Let me say something most motivational videos won't. You don't become respected by trying to be respected. You become respected by becoming self-sufficient. When you stop needing validation, people stop withholding it. When you stop chasing access, people guard theirs. When your life is full, your presence becomes rare, and rarity creates value. This is why the most respected men are often the least explainable. They don't broadcast pain, they don't justify choices, they don't argue for their worth. They live in a way that makes disrespect costly. Now here's the final test. Once you reach this point, you'll feel tempted to use it. To flex, to dominate, to prove you've changed. Don't. Power shown is power spent. The strongest men let others discover their limits, quietly, naturally, through interaction. That's the highest level of respect, and now we close the circle. Remember the man from part 1, the one who felt optional? He didn't change overnight. He didn't confront everyone. He didn't burn bridges. He changed how he moved. Less explanation, more structure, less urgency, more calm, less need, more options. And slowly, something shifted. Messages came faster. Words became careful. People adjusted, not because he demanded respect, but because he stopped offering access for free. That's the lesson. Respect is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is not dramatic. It is felt. And once you feel it, you'll never go back to being soft, available, and invisible again. Now I'll ask you one final thing. If this resonated, don't comment praise. Don't explain your situation. Just write this below. I move differently now. Because from this point forward, you should.